This is the Inclusivity EQ podcast with Saul Gomez, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. The Inclusivity EQ podcast is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Saul Gomez.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash, and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Inclusivity EQ podcast, where we explore the power of impact of inclusion across various industries and in this thing called life. I'm your host, Saul Gomez, and in today's episode, we're talking about data science, analytics, and artificial intelligence, and how leaders can leverage it in their decision making. Today, we're thrilled to have Cher Fox, a seasoned data leader with over 35 years of experience in her field. As a president and founder of Fox Consulting, Cher has been breaking down barriers in the data world, advocating for diverse perspectives in analytical business intelligence. During her career, she's been really instrumental in designing and implementing secure, strategic analytic roadmaps for companies. In addition to her consulting work, some of her volunteer work includes sharing her knowledge in her field by serving on the boards of directors for the Gamma Rocky Mountain chapter as a vice president of marketing. And she's also a frequent speaker at conferences and on podcasts worldwide. Cher, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Saul. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Absolutely. So am I. And before we dive into the meat and potatoes of our discussion, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and some key moments and experiences that shaped your journey and really what led you to the work that you're doing now?
Well, gosh, I actually started programming when I was 12 years old. My dad brought home a Commodore 64 home computer, and I spent a summer with the manual learning how to program BASIC. So I wasn't super privileged. It was a discounted program through his work. I think he barely even paid costs. They bought so many. But it was a really great opportunity to introduce me to some technology that I might not have had access to. At 15 years old, I was a little ahead in school, so I was able to leave school and go to work. I started programming at 15 years old in my career for money. I was programming those light up coasters that you get at Chili's or Outback Steakhouse for your table reservations. So that was a technology that was invented in a reasonably small town in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I got to work on that project at a really young age, which was really exciting for a young person as well as just a young woman. I graduated high school a little young. So at 17, I was already out in the world working. I actually learned how to do data analysis on Lotus 123 for DOS. A lot of keyboard strokes. So I was able to just roll that forward through a variety of temporary roles, a couple full-time roles. And then I really found this great place to land when I was about just in my very early 20s. It was for a company that developed cash management systems. So coin counters and those cash counters. And it was really exciting to be part of, that financial tech and moving that forward. I started on a team as a technical writer, and then I was moving into training on the software. And then I was moving into programming on the software. And so I really had a really unique opportunity, I think, for someone my age to really learn a lot of facets about one kind of product. Unfortunately, we got bought out and my entire team got laid off, but the parent company kept me on. And they introduced me to a few other things, including some mainframe support. I was still supporting that cash management software. And we started buying other companies. And so I was being relocated frequently for mergers and acquisitions, going into companies and, trying to figure out what did the company want to keep of what they bought, what they were going to, archive or maybe not worry about, and what maybe they thought they could sell off. So in the end, at a 10-year corporate career, I was doing mergers and acquisitions and running a 24/7 help desk for all of the Americas. So all the way from the top, all the way down to the tip of South America. Unfortunately, before Y2K, our entire division got shut down from the parent company in England. And, I'm sitting at home trying to figure out what my next steps are. And my clients are calling me. When you go through mergers and acquisitions, when you learn, new clients and you meet them and you spend time with them. And, when they call you at 3:00 in the morning and wake you up, you have to have some pleasantries amongst yourselves. Otherwise that could be a strenuous relationship. But they're calling me saying, hey, the 24/7 help desk number is turned off. We can't get anybody. I said, I'm right there with you. I don't have a job right now. And they said, well, what are we going to do? It's 1998. We don't have Y2K compliant software to run our cash registers, our coin counters, our cash counting machines. And I said, well, let me do some digging and, see if we can, find a solution. I spoke to a couple attorneys. I didn't have a non-compete. So I started my first company at the age of 25, supporting huge United States companies like Chase Manhattan and Chicago Transit Authority and Wells Fargo. I'm just a young gal out there in the world, trying to find her way. And I had this really great opportunity. And, we tell other entrepreneurs that, find a need. Well, the need for me fell in my lap. So I didn't have to find it. I was staring it in the face. So I helped my clients through Y2K, migrating them onto new data platforms, just continuing their support. But realistically, once the Y2K crisis was over, I'd worked myself out of a job. So my husband and I, we kind of looked around. Iowa is a lovely place to raise children, have families, things like that. That wasn't our family choice path. And we decided to leave Iowa and we moved to Colorado. I was just so blessed to run into some really great people along my journey here. I was able to build my network really quickly. Denver has a couple really strong tech hubs, and they're very welcoming here. So not very many people that live in Colorado are natives. I think we're all transplants from other places. So we have to learn, to play well together in the same lifestyle sandbox. But I was able to, spin my practice up in Denver pretty quickly, doing data analysis, working on business intelligence projects, lots of data projects. Now we're really focused on data quality and data governance and data strategy for companies, because as all these next generation technologies are coming at us, we need more than just okay data, good data to work with AI and machine learning. So that's my journey. I've been an entrepreneur now for 27 years.
Wow.
I've co-founded or founded 6 other companies since then, and 4 of them are all still in business. So it's a pretty good rate from success.
Yeah, congrats. That's awesome. Wow. What would you say is the most challenging aspect of what you do?
I think communicating to companies, to people, the value of data. And not just the value of any data, but the value of high quality data. Having bad data and feeding that to our next generation technologies, that's worse than having no data at all. Frankly, that would be a way better spot for some companies and how they're doing things. So, we really have to have high quality data to have trustable analytics, to make good decisions, to see operational efficiencies and improvements, and definitely to implement AI, generative AI, machine learning, even to have data science. A lot of people go to school to be data scientists, but we tend to find that there aren't enough companies ready to accept those people into their data teams because they're not ready for data science. They've got a lot of data quality problems upstream. And so those data scientists, if they do come on, they tend to be really expensive data janitors. So, and those people go to school for a really long time and probably have some pretty healthy college tuition bills that they need to pay back. So, finding those master's and PhD degrees, the right fit in our data ecosystems is really important. And that's all based on, in my opinion, having really great data to work with.
I can't tell you how much, when I'm working with clients is looking at their data, right? They either have no data or the wrong data. And what I mean by that is it's not consistent data, or it's not all the data is relevant to what they're trying to, get answers on. Mm-hmm. So it becomes cumbersome trying to clean it, right? And trying to parse out and see what data you need for whatever problems that you're trying to solve for. And I think that you're absolutely right. I think sometimes it's better just to start off with a clean canvas and to try and discern and decipher which is the good data and which one isn't, right?
Yeah, in some respects, I do a lot of public speaking, and one of my favorite presentations to give is about data quality. It's really important that we're not just collecting all the data we possibly can. We want to be collecting the data that's really fit for purpose, whatever that purpose is. Marketing is obviously, they're focused on their marketing data and customers and things like that. And our product, groups, they're going to be focused on R&D and customers and things like that. And, the financial department's going to have their set of data that's fit for their purpose. And, I think organizations struggle with having a really strong data strategy that ensures that all those departments have what they need, but that they also have some commingling between what they need, because, the data silos just won't work when everyone in the organization needs bits of data from each of the departments. So it's really important that we share data nicely in our sandboxes and that we communicate and collaborate about our data. If somebody's doing something over in the corner that no one knows about, that's not super productive for the company and likely isn't part of their business strategy anyway. So
well, I think that brings up a really interesting point, right? The person in the corner kind of not suffering in silence, but just kind of, I have this thing, but I either don't know how to, or I don't have an invitation to the party, right? And so I think that's really underscores how inclusion can help people leverage data, because, to your point with the silos, I think there's an element of cross functionality, right? Mm-hmm. When we're talking about how do we leverage data, it may be the same data set, but people might look at it through different lenses or might utilize it differently for shared objectives. Mm-hmm. But if we don't know what those are and we don't know what the use cases are, how can we cross functionally work with one another? And by extension, right? We were talking earlier, I might be stuck at 80%. Not realizing that you have the 20% of resources that I need. And here I am challenged for years on end because I don't have the funding when it was always within the organization to begin with. Because of the siloing, I didn't know to reach out to you. And so I think there's a cross-functional element to that. And I think that kind of underscores the need for inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I work with my clients and I am, buried neck deep in data projects, usually I'm brought in because, they say, well, our BI is wrong or our analytics are wrong. And usually the analytics are doing exactly what they've been programmed to do. We've got data problems upstream. We're feeding them junk. I like to equate, data fitness to physical fitness. If you feed your personal body junk and garbage and you don't take care of it, what do you get on the other end? Can you trust your body to be there for your kids? Can you trust your body to do the things that you need to do every day? And our data ecosystems are so similar. We have to feed them, high quality data. And then, they're going to perform for us like a champ. And then people are going to trust it and they're not going to waste time and resources building workarounds. So, it's super important that we're paying attention to cross collaboration for data, because like you said, you can be holding somebody up, and there's really no reason that should be the case. When I work with clients, I try to make sure that we are increasing data literacy, we're increasing data fluency, which really means I know how to work with it. I can know it exists, but I'm not fluent in the data until I know how to work with it. And, that may come from, data democratization initiatives from the top down. Our leaders are saying we're not going to have these silos. It can come from really great documentation. And it comes from metadata. It's really important that we have metadata, which really is more data about our existing data, but, it tells people how to use it and what to use it for. And there's a variety of metadata. We have reference data. There's so many ways that we can just help increase data literacy and fluency in companies. But that takes time. And sometimes there's so much broken that we don't have time to, work through that until maybe a little bit later in the process. Like I said, a lot of my clients find me, unfortunately, when the ship is sinking, the project's a little sideways, the ship's taking on water. So, we got to tip things up. We got to, be piling the water out and, get them on their way. And then we can take a step back and say, okay, why did that happen? And how can we increase data fluency and usage in the organization so that, those kinds of issues don't happen again. And a lot of that comes from, just sharing more about our data, not just, hey, it's over here in a database and it exists.
No, absolutely. I was reading over some of my notes and you had mentioned that some of the work that you do, right, emphasizes the importance of considering diverse data sets and perspectives in order to create more comprehensive and equitable solutions. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I remember coming out of COVID and I went to a conference or I went to a meetup or something, and somebody explained a challenge that happened for a product being developed during COVID because there wasn't enough diversity around the product development and the product testing. So I'm sure any one of us has walked into a store and they have a sanitation dispenser that's going to give you Purell or, one of those alcohol-based products, for us to clean our hands with so that we can protect ourselves as we're touching our face and doing all the things that we tend to do as humans. And that product didn't work for darker skinned people. And it was because we didn't include them in the development or the testing. Hey, here's my hand, dispense product. Mm-hmm. We didn't include them there. So that became really challenging for darker skinned folks, regardless of race or gender, things of that nature, because we skipped over a step of inclusion to just say, oh, hey, let's make sure we've tested that, with an Irish American and an African American and a Latina American. And, we missed that somewhere. And I can't name who shared it with me or who the company was, dispenser wise, but wow. How frustrating would that have been for people, trying to take care of themselves during such a tumultuous time in our world, right? Lifestyle, and a simple product doesn't work for them. And to find out on the back end, it's because we didn't include everyone in the conversations. So it's important for a lot of reasons to make sure that we're paying attention to the diversity in our data sets when we're developing products, when we're marketing to our customers, we need to be so inclusive and look at all the various aspects. And, we can't treat everyone the same. It doesn't work. You can't just assume, typically an African American's palm is lighter. It's not the same color on the top as it is the bottom, but it still wasn't in the color spectrum that the dispenser understood. So,
interesting.
We have to pay attention to those things, because nothing is worse when we're doing customer marketing, product development, and we're accidentally excluding people. I don't think it happened on purpose. We just missed it somewhere.
I want to say more times than not, I think there isn't any ill will, right? People aren't nefarious by nature and wake up saying, I'm going to go be, I'm going to go discriminate, or I'm going to go be biased, right? Sometimes it's unconscious. We don't even realize it.
I'm sure it just happens. And then, as any good, product development would have, people are calling, the stores that purchase these mechanisms are calling saying, hey, these don't work for, darker skinned people. And then you have to take that into consideration, back into your R&D department and figure out, where did you miss it? And, and then, write the shit, get the water out, move it forward.
Exactly. And, if that happens for something like, hand sanitizer, and because, we're talking about, in this case, pigmentation of your skin, which can be, attributed to race. But, what other aspects of diversity, right? Because, when you talk about diversity, right, to me, it's more than just race and gender. It's the people making, the scientists making the solution, right, the hand sanitizing solution, and the people that are going to market it. Maybe if they would have included the people that were going to market it, they might have said, hey, did you consider this? Did you consider that? Did you consider these folks? Because unless you're in that space, you're not thinking about it, right? You're just worried about making your widget, not necessarily even considering what considerations you should have. And so I think there's use cases for that where that happens a lot more than we realize in other cases, whether it's someone with a disability, or even when we talk about, diversity and inclusivity, an HR person and an IT person talking, right? Yes, we may all speak English, but we speak very different languages, right? We speak it very differently. And so from that context, I kind of want to move into the, data and analytics. And in that context, can you share a little bit about, one, you kind of mentioned what metadata was, right? But the quality of data and how that spills into the analytics aspect of it.
Nothing will break analytics or cause AI to have bias or hallucinate than data that we're feeding it that has all those challenges in it. So it's really important that we're using non-biased data. I know a lot of data analysts build individual portfolios in an attempt to get a job, and they will use MLB data, Major League Baseball, or hockey data, or they'll use factual data. Obviously, if you know gender, race, things like that, you can slice and dice that data a little bit differently. But trying to find holistic and, happy data sets that aren't going to get them in a lot of trouble when they're trying to say, hey, I know how to use data, and I know, I asked it this question and I was able to come up with this answer and demonstrate that in my portfolio, so that when someone reviews it, they don't find the results offensive. That's, I think, a big trick with data. Any data analysis that's done well is really storytelling in a lot of ways. You're weaving a yarn in a direction that either you've been asked to, or, from, to answer a question. And you can weave that yarn a variety of ways and kind of come up with a different end result. So, yet again, we have to make sure that when we're going, through that storytelling journey, that we're including, as many of the facets in there as possible, and that our, final results aren't offensive to anyone. So, and like you said earlier, no one does that with intent. It's just kind of accidental. There's a really great principle in Agile called the Three Amigos. And it's usually a business person, kind of a data person, and then a QA person. And those can be a variety of people. You know, your business person might be a business analyst. They could be a product owner. Your QA person might be a tester. Maybe they're, doing automation. Your data person might be just a data analyst and they're, handing that over to an architect or something, or it could be the architect. But, you try to involve people from different scenarios in the company so that they develop the most well-rounded solution. And that you're getting those different perspectives, because hopefully it's not three white people, because we're gonna go down a path, and that's where we're gonna end up, and it doesn't even have to be like that. I work on a lot of all male data teams. It just happens, and I could be there for years and years, and I had a client, I was on retainer, and we had a really long-term relationship for almost 6 years. I watched my entire full-time data team turn over. And I was thinking back today in preparation for our conversation, and I thought, I don't even think we ever even interviewed any women for the team. Wow. So did no women apply? Were no women qualified enough? But I was the only woman in the room asking other men more questions to join our team. And that was for a company that is global. They have lots of DE&I initiatives. There were lots of differing faces, races, genders, religions. There was the gamut worked there. But on this one data team, really weird. It seemed to always be male. And it's been like that a lot of my career, whether that's the IT department or, even in my mergers and acquisitions, I was working, with the clients or with their clients, a lot of men. One time in my career, I worked on an all-female team, but we had one guy. It's only ever happened one time. Wow. And it was delightful, but it doesn't matter. It's weird how that is. And so I think, we have to dive a little bit deeper into women in leadership and, different races in leadership, because your culture does give you some perspectives. Mm-hmm. And if we're not integrating all those cultures and all that outside intelligence, really, then we're not gonna be developing the best solutions, and we're not gonna be marketing them correctly, and we're certainly not gonna be delivering something that everyone looks at and says, "Oh wow, this is for me."
No, absolutely. I think, man, so much to unpack there. It's interesting to me when you said it's all male teams. Because I was going to ask that next, right? It's do you find that it's more of a male dominated environment, the space that you're in? And I guess my question therein is what makes it so, and I'll go a little bit off script. What makes it so, and how does someone like in your position, or just even if it's a male, right? How does someone in a position like yours, male or female, create opportunities to bring in more women professionals into the mix to include the female perspective?
Colorado is such a beautiful community here. We have an organization called the Colorado Technology Association that really is here for us at a state level. Yesterday, they just held their Women in Tech conference. Over 700 women got together, not all leaders in tech, but women in tech. And they networked, they supported each other, all women speakers. It's a really great opportunity to get around those that, you do want to include more. And they have those difficult conversations about working, with more women and bringing more diversity into all of our conversations and into all of our teams. There's another networking group there, international, I believe, which is the Society for Information Management, or SIM. They have another Women in Tech conference here in Colorado earlier in the year. And I think, gosh, they had 400 or 500 women there. And again, trying to solve these problems. And, we do have to be advocates for each other. I'm going to have to say that maybe in, that client's interview process where I've got an all male team and we keep, interviewing more males, I may have missed the opportunity to say, hey, why are we interviewing 5 guys? Where are the women here? Where are the, the other races and, age maybe even. I mean, I'm over 50 now, so it's a little bit of a different game for me as well, with age. But, how are we going to bring all of these perspectives together to be doing the right things out there and being most inclusive? So I know we're trying here in our state. We're very lucky that we have some women leaders with either statewide or international organizations that are leading that charge to bring us together. But I mean, we have to be fighting for it, from the trenches in a lot of ways, and we have to be lifting each other up. Some of the toughest challenges I've had in my career, especially as a young woman for inclusion, weren't from men. They were from other women. Really? Other women were purposefully excluding me. I was younger. Maybe I was more fit. Maybe I was cuter. But it wasn't about that. It's a professional environment. We're all here to do a job and, deliver products and make our customers happy and things like that. But my biggest trouble has been a lot with women not being where they need to be. I think that's changed over time. I mean, unfortunately, revealing my age, that was, maybe 30 years ago when I was having those problems. But, in a lot of tech environments that do tend to be male dominated, the women, we have to stick together. I was just telling my husband the other night that I was reflecting on that exact same client that I had an all male team. And I remember we had a really bad year. We ran through a bunch of business analysts. We couldn't find consultants that were a good fit. We couldn't find full timers that were a good fit. It was a role with very high expectations. We had a woman come through that role. We had an Indian American come through that role. I think the DEI was there from just that perspective, but the woman that came through the role, she really struggled. And I had to train all of these people as they came on as a consultant because they were in my workflow, my development cycle, and I tended to be the consistent factor in that development cycle. So, but when she was struggling with the expectations, of that her managers had of her, which we had very different, reporting structures up, she threw me under the bus to somebody and said I wasn't helping her. And one of the other women in the company heard that and said, yeah, no, that's not how Cher works here. And there's not a lot of women running around this organization. We don't throw each other under the bus. We support each other. So if you needed help, then, you should have asked someone else, or, HR had women in it, if she was really struggling. But, that woman said, absolutely not. That's not the Cher that we know. I mean, why would a client keep me for almost 6 years if I was sabotaging other women? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But it was a really hard role. And often when people were moving through it so quickly, I would have to add it to my workload in order to keep my workflow going and meeting deadlines. So, I didn't want that. That wasn't, my goal. So we as women have to support each other and not make men feel excluded. So, I don't think men purposefully plan to exclude us. And there were a couple times, my all male teams, they'd have meetings and I'd be like, well, why wasn't I in there? Oh, well, we didn't want to bother you. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not getting a diverse perspective. So, and then they included me on some of those, all male huddles. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. We might have missed thinking about that, getting the woman's perspective on it. So
but it's interesting you say that, right? And because a lot of times I've come across, again, very well intended, but the very reason why people exclude others is because, well, they don't think like us, right? And so if you think about inclusion, right, and you think about building diversity within your teams, and you're saying, well, they don't talk like us, they don't understand us. Well, are you talking about really inclusion, or are you talking about assimilation? Because there's a difference between including someone and assimilating someone, right? There's this notion called ducks pick ducks. And so so what, right? For me, the risk there is groupthink, right? If you're looking at someone just because they act like you, talk like you, look like you, walk like you, right? Then are we really talking about being inclusive? Because being inclusive is including others because of their differences, because they're not like us, because they don't think like us. And I think that's where you really get the innovation and creativity. When considering all that, right, you also talk about defining and optimizing data. Mm-hmm. How do you go about doing that? Considering what we've talked about, in the context of clean data, how do you help organizations define what is good data, and then how do you go about optimizing it?
Typically when organizations are building a data solution, we'll just keep it generic. There's some fact finding that you have to do to figure out what goes into that solution. What do you need? We get a lot of pushback from clients because we say, hey, can you put some controls on your source system so that it accepts cleaner data, and we'll, push back. Oh, no. We want to capture it all. But the data team can clean it up for us. Okay, great. We love the challenge. Thank you. But, it's a fact finding mission to figure out, what do we really need? Who's going to use it? When they're going to use it? Is it daily data, monthly data, quarterly data, yearly data? And all of that factors into, modeling and mapping a solution, and then building that. Now that we have the cloud, we have all this extensive storage, available to us to try things and say, well, maybe this is the data set that you want to use, and spin it up and see, how that goes. So, we can pilot some data solutions and see, what, if that meets the need or not. A lot of companies, they spend so much time and money migrating between solutions. I've migrated, clients off of SAP onto Microsoft, or off of Microsoft, heaven forbid, onto SAP. Their licensing is just so expensive, but, and that's a really good time, doing a major migration. It gives you time to step back and reevaluate that data and say, do we really need all of this? And, some clients are leaving the cloud and they're moving back to the data center in some respects, because your data can run wild in the cloud, and then you get this bill at the end of the month that you weren't expecting. And, some people are dialing that back and saying, hey, we're not going to let the APIs run wild. And, we need a little more control over this, and bringing that back to a data center, which has a more structured storage solution. They can't store everything in anything. So you have to have an archiving plan. You may say, hey, we're going to aggregate all the data up to, 2 years ago. And that's your cutoff. And then you get detail last year and this year. Or we're almost through 2024, but I would recommend to most clients, you've got 2024 detail, 2023 detail, 2022 detail, and we aggregate up to the end of 2021. So your balance sheets work and your P&L statements are up to speed. If you want anything more than that, depending upon how much, the volume of data that a client may have, you have to take all of that into consideration, because the amount of data and how fast it's coming at you drives, what your solution should look like for you, and how flexible and scalable it's going to need to be based on volume and in speed. So,
I also think that there's how do you operationalize the data, right? It's you need to know what your parameters are, and then what you're trying to do with the data kind of help. Hopefully, I'm assuming it'll give you a good indication of what it's going to take to process it, right? And how do you want to illustrate it? How do you want to tell the story? Some people rely on dashboards. Some people want reports. Some people want just a bulletized list of metrics. What does that look like? What does that look like? How often, to your point, right? How often are we producing this data? Mm-hmm. We briefly talked a little bit about AI and touched a little bit on that. And I want to ask you specifically regarding AI, how does in your world, how does data management play or interact with AI, and specifically in the financial industry? Because there's a lot of concern, right, with our economy, the state of our economy, and Bitcoin and versus the Fed coin and just all these, Ether and all these other types of cryptocurrency and just the dollar, right? And the world currency. And so what does that mean for you as a data person?
For us, it's really asking the right questions about, how does using AI and pulling it into the mix, how does that support your business strategy? How does that support your data strategy? How does it support your marketing strategy? How are you going to use it? What are you going to use it for? In a lot of circles, especially cyber circles, there's a lot of concern around AI and what it's generating, how that data is being used, the security around that, the validity of what it's generating and creating, and how do we govern it? AI governance it's the hot topic at all of the AI and the cyber conferences right now. There's almost not a session I sit in that somebody's not talking about one of the two of those. And, where some companies get stuck is you can't govern the AI if you don't already have data governance in place. You can't govern your AI if you don't already have data security protocols and your data privacy protocols in place. So it's really following the correct methodology of data management in a lot of respects to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row before you put on this next generation technology. I was at my last DAMA chapter meeting. We had a really great speaker come and share. He did a study on 2024 data management insights, and he told this story about how a company didn't have all their data management ducks in a row. They started using generative AI. It blew out their storage system. They created way more data than they were expecting in the time frame that they were expecting. They ran out of data storage. It shut their entire data ecosystem down, and they had to turn the generative AI off. Well, I can't imagine somebody didn't get fired over that. Didn't ask the right questions, didn't have all the facts, didn't have a strategy around it and some governance to say, okay, we're going to let it get to here, but we're not going to let it get way over here, I think a few things went wrong there. And, I would never want to be the consultant or part of the team that didn't advise that executive correctly. And, they come back from conferences and they've got all these new buzzwords and they're talking all these new languages and they're so excited. Oh, I heard a case study with our competition and they're using AI. We need to be using AI. And that's great. But you got to make sure you have all of your security in place and all of your data management in, all the structure around that in place, so that you have a stopping point for that. I mean, if you turn generative AI on and you feed it a variety of data, good data, bad data, no data, biased data, wrong data, whatever, and within an hour, it blows out your entire data ecosystem and shuts your entire data ecosystem down, that's a problem. Right. A key fact was missed there. So, that's in what I'm seeing. That's where we're having that conversation around AI is how do I govern it? How do I control it in some aspects? We joked earlier about Skynet and the Terminator, and it has occurred to me a time or two, does James Cameron know something the rest of us don't know? We get all these futuristic things from movies, whether they're dreamt up in the back of somebody's mind or, whether they're really being developed at a company and we're just not privy to it. So, I know some really great people in cybersecurity. One gal, I consider her a close friend of mine. We've spent some time together. She is Latina in the military. She consults with the government. She knows things she can't tell the rest of us. Right. Are those good things or bad things? How is the government using these technologies? What does our future look like with that? So, I think we need to pay attention. I don't think AI is going to take all of our jobs. I hate seeing that on social media. We have to engage, we have to upskill, we have to learn, we have to participate, we have to want to participate. I think it's hard for our next generations to come up and want to be interested in tech, data, AI, things like that, because they're inundated with it every single day. Xfinity tells me what I want to watch on my TV. Hulu makes recommendations to me. My Roomba does all my vacuuming. Alexa makes my grocery list. So I think our next generations, we could struggle with getting more people involved in tech and data and working with these new technologies, and participating and attempting to maybe control isn't the best word, but to govern and to mitigate when things do go awry and, mitigate and recover quickly. So, that whatever was dependent upon that can move forward.
Absolutely. I think it's so critical to involve our youth and expose them to these things, right? Because otherwise, that's great that we have technology such that, everything looks smooth, right? The kind of that analogy of the duck in the pond, you see the glass top, but you don't see the legs churning on the bottom. And if we don't expose our youth or inspire them to get into tech and look at data from a different perspective, who's going to churn, right?
Well, yeah, then Skynet does happen, right? Because nobody's watching the tech anymore.
Right.
That's shenanigans, but
looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus, what I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. And download the book for absolutely free.
Yeah, for our listeners, you mentioned generative AI. And so, I have a lot of conversations with folks about AI. And so there is a difference, right, between AI and generative AI. Can you talk a little bit about that?
You're going to put me on the spot. I do a lot of preparatory work for AI. I don't always work with the technology directly. So, a lot of us use ChatGPT. We ask it for help. In a lot of cases, it's already, scrubbed the internet. It's gathered as much information as it can. So it summarizes, it gives us ideas. I had somebody show me just the other day, he fed documents into it and then said, give me summaries across these documents. Give me 10 bullet points that summarize these 3 documents collectively. And I thought, oh, genius. I was like, wow, that's so cool. So I feel like with some of those, and they're learning, they are for sure learning, but I don't necessarily think that they're generating super new ideas. Whereas generative AI is smart enough to generate new ideas and new data and new opportunities that maybe it's learning even faster and it's keeping up and it's becoming smarter and smarter and smarter. And that's where companies can get into trouble as, you feed your your generative AI, data, and based on an algorithm, it starts churning out new data. That's where all of a sudden that explodes and eats up your entire data ecosystem. So, but that's someone who does a lot of preparatory work.
Sure.
I don't work with a lot of clients that are super high in their levels of data maturity where they're ready for those kinds of technologies yet. I think a lot of companies want to be there. They're nervous that they're going to be late to the party. They're nervous that, their competitor's going to have the advantage, but they won't if you're doing your data management structure appropriately, if you're getting your security procedures and policies in place, if you're doing all of your due diligence and having a really strong data foundation. When your competitors skipped over a lot of that and they're having to cut stuff off and turn it off and do some cleanup before they can move forward, I don't think you're going to be left too far behind. In fact, you very, well could come out ahead in those situations. So,
right, because if organizations aren't ready for generative AI, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, right? So in sequence, right? Call Cher first, then implement generative AI.
You know what? At least you have to call Cher first. I give away a lot of knowledge on LinkedIn and in my blogs and things like that, and at my sessions that I speak at, but. You certainly should take a realistic assessment of where you're at. Nothing is more challenging for us as a consulting firm when we've done a discovery call and, a client and us decide to work together. And, the client has said, oh, this is where we're at with our data and we're pretty good with it and yada, yada, yada. And, we're happy with it. We don't get a lot of errors and things like that. And then you actually get, we'll say on site, but into the data, you really start deep diving into the data and you start coming up with a lot of problems and challenges. And, then you go, okay, was management just not realistic about the status of their data and their level of data maturity? Or do they really not know? Right. And, they've been told it's okay and we're hiding things in essence from them. There's always a guy. I'll say a guy, it could be a woman, but it's almost always a guy. There's always a guy at a desk in a corner somewhere that really knows the status of a client's data set. And management's maybe they've gotten tired of hearing about it, but they're also not enabling that person in their workflows to fix it. That guy, he's so busy keeping the lights on, he doesn't have the capacity or the tools or the time to make the improvements, but he does really know what the status of it is. And, then we're not teaching our leaders to be realistic about what their level of data maturity is and where they really stand. And if we don't do that, that's a recipe for disaster because then they do turn on AI. They do start feeding a language model, trying to teach it, or, worse, generative AI, which can just spin out of control so quickly if we really don't, we really don't have the guardrails around it and a real strong harness on it to make sure that it doesn't get away from us. So, having realistic expectations and knowledge about what your data environment is doing. And sometimes, that's just having an outside perspective come in that, doesn't have a lot of alliances with people and allegiances. I'm not worried about, hurting my friends because, it's like everything else. It's not happening on purpose. Right. They're not deliberately sabotaging the data. They just don't have time in their workflows to maybe automate some validation or put some test automation in. They're not using data observability tools. They don't have everything they need to do it right. But you have to communicate that up so that your management knows that and your leaders know that and they can, start working that problem from the top down so that they can get there and they can get there realistically and then everyone can be happy in the data ecosystem. Okay, we're confident that where we're at is really where we're at. We're not blowing smoke, the wool's not pulled over anybody's eyes. We don't have a whole bunch of data quality problems we've shoved under the rug. It's a realistic space
Sure.
that they can then decide their next decisions with, more advanced technologies.
You're right. And I think sometimes that person you talked about in the corner somewhere that has all the insights, in some cases, I've seen where they've gotten tired of banging their heads against the wall and they're just doing enough to get by. And, unfortunately, a lot of I run across where folks are trying to keep the boss, right? Bandwidth, manage their bandwidth, and they just don't like the what the data's showing. So they don't communicate it on up, and then nothing happens until something happens, right? And then it's like, oh shoot, the cat's out the bag now. And unfortunately, typically it's the leader that ends up, getting dismissed. And not that frozen middle that's unwilling to let that communication filter. So from an inclusion standpoint, I think it's important to aggregate all the different perspectives, good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because it shouldn't be and I think here's where psychological safety comes in. It's not a matter of who's going to get in trouble, but what did we learn from these gaps, from these vulnerabilities, and how do we get after, them to try and mitigate them and shore those up and fix them. But until that happens, unless we're being inclusive, unless we're having conversations with all the different stakeholders, including, the guy on the bottom rung that's in the corner just trying to stay afloat, get that person's perspective, right? How can we fix ourselves?
Yeah, there's another agile concept, which is to fail fast and to actually celebrate that. Hey, we found it before it got to this next step, or before it went to market, or we found it this morning before month end close, with financials and things like that. So it's very much about creating that safety, like you said, from a psychological perspective, and even just from I'm not going to lose my job perspective. But that's double-sided, because like you said, people get tired of banging their head against the brick wall. And if the leaders aren't listening, then they hate somebody like me, because they're like, oh, the expensive consultant you'll listen to, but I've been telling you this for 2 years and you didn't want to listen to me, and then I'm the bad guy all of a sudden. And then, working with me gets to be a little resistant. So, nothing starts scaring people more when you bring consultants in to redevelop processes and Excel workbooks and data flows and analytics that have been there a long time, because people have skeletons buried in some of those things. And I had an oil and gas client. They gave me this really nasty workbook and they said, we just need this final page developed. And I said, okay, great. So you start reverse engineering the workbook through all the other tabs and, through all the VLOOKUPs and everything. And you start reaching out to people and you say, well, I need to understand this number. And they're like, but you're supposed to just develop that page. And I'm like, yeah, but that page calls this page. And, I have to follow the flow. And sure enough, there was $1 million that I couldn't find in any source system. And this was a publicly traded company. And I fought so hard for this $1 million. I'm like, I can't find it. And the person who was responsible for the workbook said, oh no, crazy consultant. She doesn't know what she's doing. Under the bus I go again for that deep tissue massage. And turns out he had fat fingered a manual edit 1 month and he didn't take it out the next several months, and it got publicly reported and that person got fired. I obviously never want my work to ever result in that, but
yeah,
there's a lot of bodies buried in some of these old ways of doing things. And then when a fresh pair of eyes comes in and starts asking all the questions, it becomes a scary time. And yet again, it does boil down to safety. And, if that gentleman had come forth when I first asked the question and said, oh crap, I did do that, would he have still gotten fired? No one knows.
Right.
But God, I think I fought him for 3 months before he finally copped to it. And, he lied so many times to so many people, they lost trust in him. And that may have been what, was his ultimate demise, not the fact that he did the right thing 1 month, missed pulling it out the next 6 months, I think how he handled it in the
Well, I
end
mean,
was the
from a
bad
root cause
spot.
analysis, right? If we're talking like root cause analysis, I wonder what compelled that person to do the manual override and fat finger it, right? Or fat finger it the next month, or what was in place or wasn't in place to keep that from happening. And is the psychological safety such that he didn't feel like he could bring that up, right? Because
Right. Well,
that's
and
the way
maybe
you've always done it, or I just really messed up and I'm afraid that if I make a mistake, I'm gonna get fired. So I'm just gonna try and hide it. There's so many different variables that go into that, right? And sometimes some things, right? I'm really careful about psychological safety, that just because you make a mistake doesn't mean cause and effect isn't gonna happen. It's how that came about sometimes. And it may not even be about the $1 million. It's more about the trusting and about being truthful about it. And, I don't know which one it is, and we'll probably never know, but I think, being, I go back to inclusion, right? When we are inclusive of different perspectives, even if it's dissenting opinions, I think those are valuable because they do cause us, at least they do cause me to think like, can I see this a different way, or should I think about this in a different way? Right? Let me just double check. And if I'm still right, even better. Now I'm even more confident, right? But if I'm not, thank you for bringing it up and pushing back, because I otherwise wouldn't have realized it. And I wouldn't know till, fast forward, you're sitting here asking me about the $1 million and I'm like, holy crap. Right. And so it's really interesting how that plays into a lot of different aspects of the work that, people do.
Yeah, I mean, people can look, depending upon a person's background, whatever that means, race, gender, religion, whatever. No two people tend to look at the same data the same way. So, we can have one central repository with what we believe to be one version of the truth of numbers and data and text and things like that. But two people can tell very different stories with that data and bring that, to a meeting. And then instead of the meeting being a productive meeting about next steps, it's a battle over who's right, when in essence, they both could be right, depending how they sliced and diced that data and how they looked at it and the story that they ended up telling with it. So trying to catch that more upstream and having more people be involved in business analysis and data analysis and quality assurance, having all those different perspectives so that when a product does get through its life cycle of development to release, that when we get to release, we've looked at it from all the different angles that we needed to, and we've made sure that everyone feels included in that, and that, much like a hand sanitizer dispenser, we didn't leave some people out because of pigmentation of their skin.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you said that, because this kind of brings up, another area that I wanted to kind of touch on is well, first, let me ask you this. What are some things that you learned along the way in the context of, what's the cost of doing nothing, right? A lot of times we hear that. What's the cost of doing nothing, right? If we don't, because it truly takes a village. So if we're not being inclusive, if we're not including different perspectives, if we're not trying to listen to the people that aren't in the room, what's the cost? How do you sell clients on being more inclusive and of different perspectives in their quest for data management solutions? How do you socialize the cost of doing nothing or not being inclusive?
It's hard to quantify the cost of doing nothing until it's too late. Whether that's the loss of a competitive advantage, a product being delivered that, isn't made for everyone without that being the, original intent. It's always a hard conversation with companies and clients and people to place their data, to look at their data really as an asset. And, if it's an asset, I'm going to be looking at multiple facets of it to see how I can strategically harness it to move my business forward, whatever that means, per my business strategies. So, it's a really good question. And I have to say, I'm probably not doing a very good job at it. Most of the time, we're pulled into a situation that already exists. People are already there. They've been hired. They've picked their team, and this is what we're working with. At Andon, there are opportunities to take a look at that. Yes. And, as I said, my last long-term client, I think missed that opportunity as being the only woman on the team and being the only woman in the room during interviewing to say, gee, and look around and say, God, I'm still going to be the only gal here still. But, most certainly not inclusive. So, and, a bunch of
All right. Yeah. So, and I'll go ahead. I'll do it after when I'm editing. But we were talking about that, right? The cost of not doing anything. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably more opportunity for me to be noticing that and speaking up. But I think I also sometimes as a consultant, I'm so buried in the weeds and the data weeds and things like that. That I might I'm missing those opportunities. But a lot, I'm not usually hired to build teams. I may be mentoring teams, and mentoring people that have come through HR, and that have already gone through maybe an interview process that I wasn't included in. So, right. I mean, I can't be everywhere and I can't do all the things. So, right. But it's definitely something that everyone has to fight for. I mean, managers have to take that into consideration when they're building teams, and HR has to take that into consideration when they're, looking for good fit for teams and things like that. So it takes a village. We all have to participate, to, reduce the risk of a lack of inclusivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me ask you this then. Who should be at the table that typically isn't at the table in your experience?
That's a really good question, because when I'm at women's conferences, a lot of women ask me, well, how are you getting a seat at the table? Well, when I'm a consultant, so I'm an outside force, which a lot of times is that. In cases where I've felt excluded or been excluded, I've asked for that seat. And I tell a lot of women, if you're invited, get to the meeting early and take the seat. It's there for you. Grab it. So, right. If you get to the meeting late and you're stuck standing in the back and you feel a little excluded, that may be, on your level of preparation that could have been prevented. So, go ahead. Having strong ideas, not being afraid to speak up. A lot of people in tech, they tend to be a bit introverted, and it's really hard for you to get a seat at the table if you're introverted. I met with a prospective client last week, and we were asking questions of each other because it's a two-way street. We have to decide whether we're going to work together, and one person would speak and then the other person would just go, same. Okay, you didn't have anything to add to that. I get it, you're a little introverted, but is there nothing else to expand upon? Okay. So you can't be that. You can't always be agreeable. You can't always be controversial either, but you have to have good opinions that support strategies in the company, and you have to be willing to communicate those, without someone saying, wow, you're a really good communicator for being such and such race or such and such gender or such and such age. I mean, that could be said of anyone. I mean, nobody ever told me when I was 18 in the corporate world. Wow, you're a really good communicator for an 18-year-old. I mean, I don't know how I'd have taken that at the time. I'd have probably been fine with it because I'm a chatterbox, but those kinds of things don't sit well with everybody. Right. And, again, it's a backhanded compliment that probably wasn't meant to be mean or, demoralizing or demeaning, but, it just comes out that way. And it
does.
It depends who you are. And,
it can have a chilling effect, right? It can have a chilling effect on the person. And then they might not come forward anymore.
But you have.
So, I'm reminded of, a sea story in the Navy, right? We call them sea stories, back in band camp. But I remember, so I was a climate organizational climate specialist, and so one of the ways that our leader of the organization was able to get really at the bottom of a lot of issues was by going to the source. So this person was very senior, C-suite, considered a C-suite, and so there's layers, right? There's the supervisors, the managers, the directors, the VPs, then the advisors, and all this stuff, right? So. And he had an open door policy, and we'd always talk about how, people aren't coming, to come talk to me. I have an open door policy. Well, if people have to get through your senior advisor, your chief of staff, your executive director, your all these before they get to your office, of course, no one's going to come see you, right? So because he felt like he was missing context when he was trying to improve morale and improve the culture and just do stuff, make sure that sailors, knew that he cared about them. And so he started doing his brown bag, this monthly brown bag. And his only stipulation was, I only want entry-level people and below. I don't want supervisors there. I don't want managers there. I want the entry-level people that have less than 4 years in the military. And
it's really
he's got, thinking. He's got 35 years in the military. So there's a huge gap, right? But he wanted to hear the voices of the unheard. A lot of times, it's they're hearing them, and by the time it filters up to the top, it got lost somewhere in the sauce. And so I thought that was really innovative that the leader had brown bag lunches, and it was a closed door meeting with the junior people, and he's like, tell me what sucks and how I can help you.
Right. And, I mean, sometimes you have to ask, and right. if he wants it, then he may have to initiate it.
And what was funny is a lot of times he would take their ideas and he would never tell his leadership team that it was, the junior people said this. He'd say, I was thinking about this, that, or the other. And of course, it had turned into a great idea because the boss said it. Right. And so It was just interesting to me how sometimes you just have to have a different voice telling you. And it makes sense, right? Something, the way they said it, the tone. And, I was laughing earlier. You said something similar. And I think a lot about my wife where she'll tell me something for years on end. And then a buddy of mine will say, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so brilliant. And my wife's
your wife's in the corner going,
are you freaking kidding me? I've been telling you this for years. Oh, well.
Yeah, sometimes that's the role of a consultant. We're beating the same drum. It just all of a sudden sounds different because it's a more expensive drum of some.
So it's got to be better, right?
So it shouldn't be that way. I've been really lucky that I've worked with some really great clients that have some really great cultures, and we've developed long-term relationships. So. Multi-year partnerships are, they're our bread and butter. And, those people become actually, I think from just about every long-term client I've ever had, there's one person I'm still super close friends with, from there. And, much like your military background, I always equate projects. Some projects are like going to war. I mean, I got to have your back. You got to have my back. I've got to know you're not going to throw me under the bus. You've got to know that I'm not going to throw you under the bus. Well, that manager's not listening. It has to be a collaborative, inclusive environment, in all ways. So, we have to trust each other, and we have to want to listen to each other, not just hear, but listen and actually understand that person's, input, perspective, and take that into consideration. So
absolutely. You're absolutely right. As we start to wrap up, let me just say that it's been a treat talking to you. It's been really fun having this conversation. I've been waiting for this conversation because I don't think we have enough conversations about AI And it really specifically, if I'm being selfish here, right? AI, inclusion, and just really technology, right? Data, AI, and inclusion, because, they're really something that's near and dear to me. And I think they all can coexist. But any final thoughts?
When people ask me that, and I think it's a perfect fit for this session as well. We have to look out for each other and we have to take care of each other. I hate to see the human element leave human resources with, all of the ATS systems that are filtering resumes. And, I was really lucky when I started my career that I got to tell my story. I was rare at, 12 years of age to be a female programmer, and we didn't have STEM back at that time. And, most of my career, I've been supported by men and had really strong male mentors that supported me as a woman, even when other people didn't and would stand up for me. So, it doesn't matter race, gender, etc. We all have to be looking out for each other. Sometimes, you have to prop somebody else up to get ahead, and sometimes they get to prop you up to get ahead. We're all working together to make the world a safer place, to harness these crazy technologies that will do all these wonderful things for us, but that if we're not governing them could be used for harmful ways. So, and potentially might be already, and we just don't know about it. So, it's important to continue to communicate and collaborate and look out for each other. So we all need to do a better job of it, including myself, as I've learned today, reflecting in preparation for our time together. So absolutely. I'll probably have to add that to my client discovery questionnaire to talk about it more. So that's a takeaway that I definitely will have. But it's been a fun conversation, and thank you for allowing me to have it. I'm probably not 100% the right person that you should be having it with, but maybe I can make some suggestions of some women that are really breaking through some barriers out there that awesome. You guys can have.
But hey, think of it this way. That
you can have that much more right conversation with. So,
well, if you're not
kind
the
of
right
fallen
person, into. My opinion differs, because if you're not the right person, right, and you weren't on this podcast, then how would I ever, have any inkling or understanding that these people exist out there? So I think you're absolutely the perfect person to have this conversation with, and hopefully in time, I'd love to have you back and catch up, and but for now, what are some things that you're working on? What's just some projects, if you can share, that you're working on right now?
So by the time this airs, it probably will have passed, but Denver Startup Week is a really popular week here in Denver next week. I'm putting together an entire day of sessions about risk management and AI and attracting top talent. And oh gosh, data. We're having a data conversation, how to modernize sales using AI. So a lot of our conversations are going to be revolving around AI next week. It's what companies want to learn about, and it's what they need in their companies as startups for resources. I am speaking at Cyber Cheyenne in Cheyenne, Wyoming, the first week of October. I'm always still learning about the security side of the world and what's hot in cyber and InfoSec. So I'm really excited to go up there and see what's happening in Wyoming. I had the pleasure of going over to the West Slope of Colorado and speaking at West Slope Startup Week, and I learned a lot about what's happening even in our state, but how different it is over there. My DAMA chapter is currently doing our virtual CDMP study group. So we're trying to get more certified data management professionals out there in the world so they can be doing all the great things that we need with data management structures and best practices to help all these companies move forward with this next generation technology. So I'm busy enough, I think.
That's awesome.
Just trying to contribute to my community. We have this, I will close on this. We have this beautiful initiative happening again from our statewide association, Colorado Technology Association. We are building a resource portal, basically a hub to connect Colorado companies to Colorado talent, and providing both of those entities all the resources that they may need in between to make those connections. So I'm really excited to be a part of that initiative. I love seeing Colorado, supporting Colorado from a variety of different areas. And it's really an opportunity for a lot of other states to, take some initiatives as, statewide organizations to promoting tech, working through DE&I. We have some amazing people on these resource groups that are disabled, that are fighting for those rights and making sure that this portal is used by everyone for everyone, and it's developed by everyone for everyone. So maybe I can come back when that portal's in place, or we can put you in touch with somebody at CTA that helped lead that effort. So it's a statewide initiative, and I'm really excited and I'm honored to be a part of it.
That sounds exciting. Yeah, I'd love to have you back to talk about that. That's awesome. I'll bug you for one more thing. What's a favorite quote that comes to mind? Just, whichever one that comes out of your head.
I'm not good at quoting people.
Okay, what about a book? What are you reading these days?
So, this is the Dama Dimbach for our CDMP certification. It's a big book. It's bigger than 8.5 by 11. It's our International Association's book to study for the CDMP. I got my CDMP through my chapter last year in our virtual study group. I have to brush up a little bit this year because I'm teaching some of the chapters, so that puts a lot of pressure on me to prepare those coming in behind me. So that is my book. Right, always my book.
What's CDMP for our listeners?
Certified Data Management Professional. So it's actually not a really popular. It is considered in the data space one of the top 10 certifications to have, but I find it's not in most companies' drop-down list of certifications to have. So when they're looking for data governance people, when they're looking for data management people, when they're looking at just kind of a lot of generalized data people that should be able to speak to storage interoperability, reference data, master data, metadata, things of that nature, this is the book that someone should have read and should have passed the exam for those kind of opportunities. So nice. We're working hard to spread the love about it. It's a big book, though. It's almost 700 pages. So there's a whole lot of it. There are some graphics in there. Yes.
I can read it.
Right. Well, you do need to read it. Like I did, you have to tab it. It's an open book test, which is good because there's a lot in here. You have to tab it. And then let's see, do I have anything color coding wise? Oh, I don't think my camera's going to let me show. I have a little bit of color coding down at the bottom. Oh, there it is. You can just see the highlight down at the bottom of the color coding. So it's a big book, and it's a pretty tough test. So I'm glad I passed it last year. It definitely showed me my strengths and my weaknesses. So
awesome. And finally, where can people find you? How can people get a hold of you? Whether they want to do business with you, whether they want to know more about data management, governance, or just in general, if they want to connect with you.
I'm probably the easiest to find on LinkedIn. It's one of the classes that I teach out in the community because I don't think getting ahead on that platform should be a secret. I have a handle. I brought it over from Twitter when I thought it was going to die, even though it's converted into X. So if you look up the Datanista, you will find me.
Awesome.
But I'm usually the first Cher Fox most people find. So I'm probably the most active on LinkedIn. The second most active one, she's a jewelry designer out of Arizona.
Awesome. Well, hey, again, it's been a treat talking to you today. And again, hope to have you back. Thank you very much for sharing your time today with us.
Thank you, Saul. It was my pleasure. I'm so grateful.
Thanks. Well, folks, that does it for this one. We've been talking with Cher Fox, and I hope you got as much of it out of it as I did. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Inclusivity EQ podcast. Until the next time, stay open-minded, be curious, and continue to build your own Inclusivity EQ. I'm your host, Saul Gomez. Catch you on the flip side out here.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thanks for listening to the Inclusivity EQ podcast with Saul Gomez. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God. It's beautiful.